Michael, welcome to Boston. Safe to say you're kind of invested in a couple of fights on this card. How are the nerves ahead of those fights?
Oh man, it's definitely interesting because obviously I feel like one fight is there's the nerves associated with my guy fighting another guy from another team, even though Brad Katona and I obviously he switched teams, but obviously I'm rooting for Cody. Cody is Team Chandler through and through, and then obviously the other one is it's almost numbness, honestly, because I want to see Kurt win. I want to see Austin win. I don't want to see either of them lose. So it's tough to watch two dudes that you just hope that they go out there, they put on a great performance. One of them becomes the Ultimate Fighter winner, and then the other guy gets a contract because they put on such a great show. And the weeks we spent with each other in Vegas will never be forgotten for me. They're my brothers for life. And, it's crazy that this thing is finally ending tonight. So.
Well, let's talk about the show. You mentioned those weeks you spent in Vegas. Listen, we sat there and we watched the show, but you lived it. What was when you watched the show and you watched each episode, did you sort of think, there was a bit that happened in real life that wasn't on this TV show? And when you look at how the fighters were portrayed, how you and Conor were portrayed, what was your takeaway from the show as a whole?
I think, honestly, nobody will ever know, unless you lived it, nobody will ever know how much time we spent with the guys, the time we spent at the fighter house, the time we spent talking and in the training sessions and that kind of stuff. And you only have 12 hours over a 12-week period split between two different teams. So you really only got a net amount of 30 minutes per team, if you will, if it was split up perfectly in the middle. So there was a lot of moments that, going back and watch, because I was doing my own TUF 31 reaction show every week with a bunch of different guests, and we would watch the episode together and then kind of break it down. And there were so many times where I thought, man, there were some really cool moments that I think happened around this time that I wish would have made TV, but maybe they'll show it later. So, and that's not a knock on the production company, ESPN. It's just there's no way to fit it all. I mean, it just seemed like the weight of the world was on me and my team for almost 5 weeks straight, and it almost feels like we barely scratched the surface of the journey that was the Ultimate Fighter 31. And I think the fighters did a great job of portraying themselves, my team and Conor's team. And I think they did a pretty good job of portraying myself and Conor as well. So it was good, man. It exceeded my expectations.
I guess the breakout moment was probably the moment where he shoved you in the face and you laughed.
Oh, the face smush, yeah.
Yes,
the face smush, yeah.
I think you spoke to us in Vegas
right after.
Yeah, and your attitude towards Conor was a little different that night, and I think now we know why.
Yeah.
When you watch it back, do you sit there and you get, oh yeah, that really actually did piss me off, or has enough time now lapsed where you're like, heat of the moment, we're all good?
Yeah, no, I think it was heat of the moment, we're all good. I mean, I think no matter what, that's not in my nature. I'm somewhat of an oxymoron in the sense that I'm not here ready to fight right now if something pops off unless I have to protect my family or someone I love. Ultimately, whatever, he touched me, he pushed me, he, got in my face, whatever you want to call it. And ultimately, I know the score will be settled when we step inside the octagon and the cage door closes, and then it's like, okay, we get to do it. But, that was, I remember specifically where we were standing, where we were at when we did that interview, and my interview was much different than a lot of people would have expected, and I also couldn't put out the information that we had just gotten into a scuffle. And then I actually saw Conor that night later on, and he's like, what are you talking about? We don't like each other as much as we thought. And I'm like, well, I don't actually make it a habit of pushing people that I actually kind of like. So, it's the heat of the moment. That was right after the Lee Hammond loss, which I still think Lee Hammond should be signed to this organization tomorrow. I think he's a phenomenal talent. So it was a tough night for him, a lot of emotions going on, and it's tough losing, man. We kept stacking them up. Team Chandler just kept stacking them up.
Two last ones from me. You and Conor have been going back and forth on Twitter now. There was a while where it was sort of, well, maybe not, but now it seems his sights are firmly on you. How do you feel about that?
No, it feels good. I mean, obviously, that's what I've always signed up for. I signed up for the Ultimate Fighter for the fight at the end of the tunnel. The fight at the end of the tunnel was Team Chandler versus Team McGregor on the Ultimate Fighter, and then Conor versus Chandler. And that's the fight that I've known is going to happen the entire time. I've never wavered. And even when Conor is wavering, is he really wavering, or is he just trying to realize that every single one of you guys is watching it, every single one of his movements, every single one of his thumb strokes on Twitter? So he's a master at it. He's good at it. And I'm a man who stands firm in my convictions and my beliefs. And I think, when we step inside the octagon, it's going to be the biggest fight we've seen in a very long time. And I do think the entire world is looking forward to the greatest comeback in combat sports history. Can he do it? Is he still that guy? We don't know until he actually goes in there and fights me. So either way, I'm excited about it. I'm excited to compete against him.
Yeah. And I guess the word you've heard every day for the last year now is when.
Mm-hmm.
When? You
tell me. No, I mean, obviously we heard Conor last weekend talking about, toward the end of the year, obviously. I'm ready for that tomorrow. I'm ready for the end of the year, whenever it is. But ultimately, whenever it happens, it's going to happen at the exact right time. And I want, just like I said in my post-fight speech, I want the biggest, baddest, best Conor we've seen in a very long time. 170, 155, 185, whatever weight class we want to do it. And that isn't I'll fight him on any terms. That's I'll fight him whenever, wherever, however.
Michael, right here. We talk about the main event tonight. A lot of people think it's striker versus grappler. A lot of people mention you versus Conor. Well, obviously, you got some heavy hands, but you also have a big advantage in the wrestling. I mean, is that something you look at and just say, hey, if I just wrestle him, I can kind of get an easy win?
Absolutely. The question is, when I step in there, do I think? Absolutely. I think that cage door closes. He feels my pressure. There's no doubt that, obviously, the fight starts on the feet. I want to test it out. I do think I separate him from consciousness in the first round, if not the second round. So I'm not afraid to go play that game with him. And I also know if I pick him up, put him down, it's going to be a long night for him. So either way, I believe I have the skills to not just beat him, but beat him in a dominant fashion and continue to stake my claim as one of the best in the world at 155 and hopefully wearing that gold in the next year or so. So we'll see how the fight plays out. That's the beautiful thing. That's why we love mixed martial arts. Even a guy like me who I know I can go out there and wrestle him the entire 15 minutes, 25 minutes. Do I decide to? We'll see.
My last question. You just mentioned about gold. Obviously, Islam Makhachev is the champion of that division. Sounded like he was going to fight Charles Oliveira. It seems like that might not be happening now. Justin Gaethje just had a big win. Obviously, you're very familiar with him. How do you feel like he matches up?
I was not aware of any kind of Islam Oliveira falling out. I thought they were both fighting. But I think if that fight doesn't happen, I said on my show last week, I believe Justin Gaethje wears gold in the next 6 to 8 months. I believe whatever fight happens next in October, if Islam fights October, if he fights Oliveira, I think Gaethje fights one of those guys and Gaethje wears gold. That's my opinion. I'm a fan of Justin Gaethje, a fan of his style, a fan of just who he is as a person. But I think Islam versus Charles, I'm not going to doubt Islam ever again. I've put my foot in my mouth too many times. I think Islam has the ability to beat Charles, but I think Charles is a force to be reckoned with, so we'll see.
Mike in front right here. I'm sure you saw when Conor was he did that interview ringside during the Anthony Joshua fight, and they said, who are you going to fight next? And he said your name, but he kind of said it like, I have to do this. He didn't really want to do it. Are you getting the sense that like he's kind of begrudgingly fighting you at this point, like he's being forced into it?
No, it's a good question because, that is the way he answered the question. But, I mean, Conor can create whatever narrative he wants. Like I said, we as a society in mixed martial arts, we listen to what he says, how he says it, his voice inflection, the flippant nature in which he says it, or the emphatic nature in which he says it. So we can read between the lines. But ultimately, maybe he realized, well, I decided to do this reality show against this guy that I hope I don't want to fight, or hope I don't have to fight. And then it turns out, okay, well, now I kind of agreed that I was going to fight this guy, and now I kind of look like a sissy if I back out from fighting said guy. And I said it from the very beginning. I gave Conor kudos at the very beginning of the show. You saw when he walked in the UFC Apex and they made us stand there for 25 minutes awkwardly walking around each other and circling each other like trying to get some audio clips. I said I respect you for coming back and agreeing to fight me because I'm not an easy fight. You know I'm not an easy fight. The entire world knows I'm not an easy fight for anybody, let alone you. So I respect him for coming back and fighting me. And, I think he might have a little bit of second thoughts here and there. There's some easier fights for him to take, but we'll see what happens.
Are you checking the USADA pool at all?
I don't know how to check the USADA pool, but I know there are people who check the USADA pool, and it's daily. That whole situation is very interesting to me. I got a lot of different thoughts on it. Ultimately, like I said, I signed with the organization in September of 2020, and I could have fought October of 2020. So, this whole he retired, so it's got to take 6 months to come back. I mean, are we splitting hairs here? What are we talking about? What's to me, as long as a man is in the USADA testing pool for months on end, and he has the ability to be tested every single day or multiple times a day for a certain period of time. It's a sport. That to me is a very interesting gray area. And ultimately, I'm out here and I can fight Conor with 1 day on the USADA testing pool or a year in the USADA testing pool. It's not going to make a difference.
And last one for me: have you given the UFC an 8 all like let's get this moving at some point? Like, I have to move on, like, because you're a prize fighter and I'm sure you want to compete. If Conor takes, like, say, another 8 months, are you just like, let's move on, let me fight someone else?
No, luckily for me, I've made a habit out of getting prizes every single day. I've done a very good job of setting myself up with a very large amount of financial literacy, some great investments, and a lot of relationship capital. I'm not a guy who needs to fight tomorrow because I need to go pay my bills or buy a Maserati to flex. I'm a guy who has built wealth over the last decade and a half through smart financial decisions and having great people around me. So I'm in a good position. So it's a constant talking between my management, the UFC talking to Conor and his team, I'm sure. So, we're figuring this thing out. We're treading lightly. We're trying to figure it out. And, the information comes in slower than I want it to, more slower than you guys want it to. But it's the way it's happening, and it's going to be Chandler versus McGregor, and it's going to be fun.
Have they given you locations at all? Because I know you want to fight in Las Vegas at some point.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing. I have not fought in Las Vegas. I think it's pretty crazy to be signed with the organization now for almost 2.5 years and not fight in Las Vegas. Historically, Conor fights in Las Vegas, obviously, most of the time. So I'm looking forward to that. And I do want to feel a Las Vegas fight week. I do want to feel a Las Vegas Conor McGregor opposite me fight week. It's not a deal breaker for me. I'll fight him in a shoebox in Alaska. I don't care. But ultimately, Las Vegas would be number one on my list. And maybe not T-Mobile, maybe Allegiant Stadium. We'll see.
Michael, back here.
Follow up. So just to follow up on your comments, you don't care whether he's in the USADA pool or not, like Conor?
Well, I mean, obviously, being in the USADA testing pool is a prerequisite to competing in the UFC. What I'm saying is, are we splitting hairs with the whole he's got to be in for 6 months thing? How long was Bo Nickal's opponent in the USADA testing pool? He signed on 6 days' notice, right? This is what we do all the time. It's an interesting thing because of the character, the platform that Conor holds, who he is. We want to just dissect and make a huge deal out of this certain time frame type of thing. That's all I'm saying. I mean, ultimately, there's guys being signed all the time and they're competing. But being in the USADA testing pool is a prerequisite to competing with us, and he will be before a fight is announced. So look for that, and then look for a fight announcement right away.
I know you're not in a hurry to fight, as you mentioned. But
I'd fight him tomorrow. I'm ready to fight tomorrow, but I'm also not hurting.
Right. But do you have a deadline? Like, if things prolong to a certain date, like, is it time to turn the page or at least forget about it for the meantime? It's
a good question, and it's a fair question. It's a tough question to answer because I think every single day everything changes with time and circumstance, where we are, where we'll be tonight after the fights, where we'll be next week after the next fights, where we'll be after the title fight in October. Things change all the time. So I haven't really thought about a deadline. I've got a loose deadline in my head that I'm not going to share with you tonight. But we'll flirt with that whenever we figure it out.
Yeah. And just regarding the Ultimate Fighter, for a big part of your career, you were sort of outside looking in the UFC. You've headlined big events, pay-per-views, you fought for the belt and all the Ultimate Fighters. So just curious, outside of Las Vegas, fighting in Las Vegas, as you mentioned, is there any other bucket list that you want to hit, items in this promotion?
It's a good question. I do think I have crammed a decade of UFC fight experience in the last 2.5 years, and it's been a lot of fun. Got a lot left to accomplish. I do think, obviously, fighting Conor on the biggest stage possible, finishing him in emphatic fashion. If I have to go through another guy to get to another title shot, winning the UFC gold, wearing UFC gold. That's always been the goal, becoming the number one guy in the world who I've always thought I have been. On any given night, I think I can beat any lightweight in the entire world. So obviously UFC gold, fighting Conor, those are the two big things that I always think about. Always think about the UFC gold, and I am obviously right now focused on the task at hand, which is fighting Conor.
Michael, here to you're right. Would you have liked for Conor to show up tonight? Like it looks like he's probably not going to be here, and even if Brad hadn't switched teams, he should probably finish out the season, right?
Conor does what Conor wants to do. I think I'm a different breed, not just a separate from Conor. I think I'm a different breed from every single person on this roster and a lot of people in the entire world. Whenever I show up, or whenever I sign my name on a dotted line, I show up and I do it to the best of my abilities. And that's why I was with Kurt and Austin and Cody earlier today, seeing them, giving them a hug, telling them how much I love them, telling them that I'm excited to watch them go compete tonight, because tonight was part of the job. That doesn't mean that he's doing anything wrong by not showing up. Obviously, I would love for him to be here for numerous reasons, not the least of which would be to go say hi to him, see what's up, see how life is, see how training's going. But ultimately, Conor does what Conor wants to do, and, I'm here, and if he shows up, he does.
Hey, Mike, down to your right. I don't even know what this is on.
I don't know either.
When was the last time, like, you or your team have spoken to the UFC about this, and did they give any indication of, like, because Conor's saying, like, December, end of the year. Have they told you that, or is that just what he is saying?
I talked to Hunter Campbell less than 48 hours ago. So it's a constant moving target. I do think December isn't out of the question. By the end of the year isn't out of the question. But I don't know how likely it is. Talked to Sean Shelby last night. So it's one of those things where, man, I just have a different outlook on this sport and on the business of the sport and I don't make it about me every day. I don't wake up and say, hey, how can this world serve me? I'm here to serve the world, and answers will come to me when they come to me, and we'll figure stuff out. And that doesn't mean I'm a pushover, but that does mean I'm in a season of practicing patience. So constant contact with the UFC, my management, and they're talking to Conor's team as well. So
let's say December doesn't come to fruition for whatever reason. The next most logical date would probably be UFC 300. Is that something that might appeal to you, fighting on that card in the main event?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I would run through Conor in December if we fought in December, and then still fight on UFC 300. I would love to be on that card. I think that card makes a lot of sense. To have a guy who was outside of the organization. And I always said it from the very beginning when everybody was saying, hey, who the heck is this guy? I said from outsider to insider to contender to champion. Obviously, I fell short in the championship, but I definitely went from outsider to insider to contender, and here I am. So for a guy who came from outside of the organization and was outside of the organization for 12 years and now to storm the UFC, kick down the door to the party, I think it makes a ton of sense for me to be on UFC 300. Whether it's me and Conor or if it's after me and Conor or me and whoever, I would like to be on UFC 300, so we'll see.
There's been a lot of misinformation online about, the USADA stuff and whether or not Conor needs to be in the pool for 6 months or not. Has the UFC told you that? Have they said to you, like, yes, he does need to be in the pool for 6 months, or have they not mentioned that to you?
I've never point blank asked them, hey, does it got to be 6 months, whatever, or anytime we have been, it's always a blanket statement of, hey, that's the policy, right? To me, it's probably a 100-page USADA document where there's all kinds of fine print and all kinds of stuff, right? Just like everything in life. Jurisdictions and governing bodies love to make things complicated. To me, I'm a prize fighter, I'm a father, and I'm a husband. Those are the very simple things for me in life. I show up when I need to show up, and I do what I need to do. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, obviously the UFC said, hey, that's a prerequisite. This is what we do. We are governed by USADA. Everyone in the UFC has to be in USADA. Ultimately, though, no, I have not gotten, because I'm also not that guy. I'm not going to be calling these guys every single day, hey, what is the policy? Is this true? Is it not true? Because these guys got way bigger things to figure out every single day is the amount of fires that these guys are putting out every single day. They don't need me calling and say, hey, I read this on MMAJunkie.com. Is this true?
Thanks, man.
What?
Just
trash website. It's got to be fake news.
Michael, just one follow-up over here, just
Yeah.
on my question earlier. Like, when you got the dates, like, let's say, Conor's guys had opened in the final. The results had gone the opposite way. Would you have ever even considered not showing up tonight?
You're saying if
What I'm saying is he's not here. Would you was that even a possibility for you that let's say all your guys lost, you would have not shown up, or would you have always been at the final of this show to finish it out?
Well, so I don't. I got to clarify. I don't think me showing up at the end of this and I had no guys fighting here, I probably wouldn't have shown up either. I probably would have tucked my tail between my legs and not come. Because then once again, this is why it was never about me. It was Team Chandler versus Team McGregor, but it was never about Michael Chandler. My name was on the jersey, but it was never about me. It was always about these guys. So because I have guys here, I'm here. If I didn't have guys here, that would have been me showing up, telling the whole world, asking for attention and saying, hey, remember that reality show I did on ESPN for 12 weeks? Right? So that's why I'm here. I'm here because I have 3 guys here. I do think Cody Gibson beats Brad Katona. I do think both of my guys in the finals at 155 get a contract. One of them will get a guaranteed contract, and the other will get a contract because of a great showing tonight and because of, hopefully, what I instilled in them over the 5 weeks that we spent in Vegas.
MVP is a free agent at the moment. Can you see him signing with the UFC?
I think it's a great idea for any free agent to at least look at the UFC. Obviously, I couldn't tell you where I would be right now had I not tested free agency, had I not sat in Hunter Campbell's office and taken that phone call from Dana White. It has changed my life in insurmountable ways. So for a guy like MVP, it's tough. It depends on what his goals are. It depends on where he's at. It depends on how his relationship is with Bellator. But you're a fool if you don't at least test the market these days, because there's a lot of options outside of where he's at right now. So it worked out for me, and I can't imagine my life different.
And just last one, just want your thoughts on Israel Adesanya taking on Sean Strickland.
Man, I love Izzy. Izzy is, in my opinion, one of the greatest mixed martial artists on the planet. His skill, his ability to put together a fight, put together a game plan, beat people. But then on the other side of it, I actually got asked, I did the DC RC show the other day, and I was with DC, and it was kind of tap in. Do you agree with or disagree with, does DDP, Duplessis, does he have a better chance of beating Izzy than Strickland does? And I do think DDP is a better fighter stylistically or technique-wise, but I think Sean Strickland has that X factor. I think Izzy only gets caught in some kind of crazy thing where we all completely lose our mind because a guy like Sean Strickland, who probably doesn't have the skill set to be able to beat Izzy, just comes in, slings heavy leather with reckless abandon, and absolutely somehow shocks the entire world. So I'm excited about that fight. I think Sean Strickland he and I are a little bit different in a lot of ways. I don't think Sean Strickland and I are going to be best buds, but I think he's a good fighter, and I think that's a very, very intriguing matchup.